Welcome everybody to a look at the latest StudioCanal cult classics release, and it is 1970s Soldier Blue. So this is directed by Ralph Nelson. I've only seen one of his other films, but I was rather impressed by that, and it's called Lilies of the Field with Sidney Poitier. And this is a revisionist western, clocking in at 115 minutes long. Stars the likes of Candice Bergen, who was in the likes of Bite the Bullet and The Domino Principle, both of which also starred Gene Hackman, as well as Rules Don't Apply. Also stars Peter Strauss, who was in the likes of Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, although unfortunately that is the only film of his I've seen where he's in a significant role. And finally, it's got Donald Pleasance, who is practically unrecognisable in this film. But I've seen him in 25 other films, the likes of the Halloween series, the original series, where he's in most of those films. You Only Live Twice as a Stavro Blofeld, as well as Phenomena, and the really rather underrated 1982 film Alone in the Dark, Eye of the Devil, and Nothing Underneath. So after a cavalry group is massacred by the Cheyenne, only two survivors remain: Honus, a naive private devoted to his duty, and Cresta, a young woman who had lived with the Cheyenne 2 years ago, or for 2 years, and whose sympathies lie more with them than the US government. Together they must try to reach the cavalry's main base camp. As they travel onward, Honus is torn between his growing affection for Cresta and his duty as a soldier. So this film is most well known for its harrowing depiction of the very real event that happened called the Sand Creek Massacre. 1864, I think that was. And even though that aspect of the film is incredibly well done, the build up to that event is nonetheless very nearly as good, which is primarily down to the two leads whose characterization and interactions lend the film the necessary weight to help us sympathise with them as they get caught up in a scenario that is ultimately out of their control. It also helps that they are polar opposites, with Candice Bergen's character Cresta being particularly well done, as she is capable, level-headed, and will do anything necessary to survive, such as robbing the dead, which Honus takes particular issue with. But Honus himself does ultimately get the better payoff being a soldier in the Union Army, as he ultimately sees the despicable acts that those in the same uniform are willing to commit, which utterly mortifies him during the massacre, given all he has been led to believe at that point. The rest of the cast is also good. It is well paced, the cinematography is excellent, the majority of the score is great. The only bits of it that I have any issue with are the more parts of the score that try to make it a bit more light-hearted. Granted, it is doing it during more light-hearted scenes, but it just doesn't fit with the rest of the score as far as I'm concerned. It is overall engrossing, and despite being mostly desensitized to violence, what happens during the massacre is still shocking more than 50 years later, as this is celebrating its 54th anniversary this year. So yeah, fantastic film, and if I'd have known how great this film was before buying this release, I would have gone for what StudioCanal are currently doing with these cult classic releases, which is releasing them on 4K via a steelbook edition instead of these slipcover and normal Blu-rays. So yeah, they are doing it with another film that I've already seen called Red Sun. Already got that with the steelbook on pre-order. So yeah, I am going to be doing it in the future with ones that I already know, but I didn't really want to spend a lot of money. It's I think about £10 or £15 more for the steelbook 4K than it is for these Blu-ray standard editions or semi-limited editions, because we do get some extras physically and otherwise. But yeah, there's the disc itself. There's no reverse cover on the sleeve. Like I said, you do get the slipcover as well, which does go really rather nicely with the rest of the line. I've got several of the films from the Cult Classics line so far, and yeah, it does all obviously match together. And we also get a few art cards as well. So minor spoilers for the film, because obviously these shots show off part of the film itself. And finally, so yeah, it is overall a really rather great film, and one that needs to be seen to be believed, and one that does need to be seen as well, just in terms of cinema as well, because yeah, this really did shock the US audiences, because They were typically, you're used to westerns that depicted Native Americans in only a bad light. They very rarely gave them any characterization. There was very few westerns before this that showed Native Americans in any kind of sympathetic light at all. So yeah, this was really rather radical in that regard, but it was also radical in the fact that it was using the Sand Creek massacre as a allegory for the Vietnam War and how that was affecting the US population at the time. So yeah, that was why it wasn't particularly popular in the US, although it was a massive hit over here in the UK. Even the theme song "Soldier Blue" going in top 10. Yeah, it was a huge hit over here, a huge hit in the rest of Europe as well. It was just America that really wasn't ready to swallow that bitter pill over the Sand Creek massacre and over in the war that they were committing at the time. Yeah, fantastic film, one that I highly recommend. You can imagine though nowadays if this film was released, you get a certain crowd being derogatory towards it and calling it a certain word and yeah, thinking it flies in the face of US history and stuff like that. But it is depicting US history that actually happened. Might well not have happened to the same extent. There are some numbers that range between 150 to 500 Native Americans that died in the Sand Creek massacre, more than half of which were women and children. And this does depict violence towards women and children. Although this UK edition has been slightly cut down in terms of the violence, there's some horse falls that have been cut out, and there is a certain scene that involves sexual assault with a woman and a child that is just in frame that is also cut out because it's sexual assault with children in the same frame is just not allowed due to an act that came in the late 1930s or something like that. So yeah, but regardless, a fantastic film, one that has a really good cast, and yeah, just as shocking as I imagine it was in 1970 as it is today. And I say that as a massive fan of horror films, and yet the violence in this, yeah, really did hit hard. Nonetheless, so thank you for watching. If you have seen this film before, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.